I knew something was wrong the moment the wedding coordinator looked down at her clipboard, then quickly looked away from me. "Mrs. Carter?" she asked with an awkward smile. "Yes?" She hesitated. "Your table is, over there." She pointed toward the very back of the ballroom. Right beside the restroom doors. I actually laughed. I thought she was joking. Then I saw my name. Table 18. Everyone else from our family sat near the dance floor. My ex-husband and his new wife were at the front. My daughter's college friends sat closer than I did. Even distant relatives I barely recognized had better seats. But me? The woman who carried Emily for 9 months. The woman who worked 3 jobs to keep food on our table. I was sitting next to the bathrooms. As guests walked past me every few minutes, I felt something inside me quietly break. I looked toward the sweetheart table. Emily never looked in my direction. Not once. That was the moment I believed my own daughter had erased me from her life. I had no idea I was only seeing the beginning of a much bigger story. 3 months earlier, when Emily announced her engagement, I cried harder than she did. "Oh, Mom," she laughed while hugging me. "You always cry." "I earned these tears." She smiled. "I know." She had always been my little girl. After my divorce from Richard 20 years ago, it had been just the 2 of us. Richard remarried within 2 years. Emily stayed with me. Money was always tight. There were nights I skipped dinner so she could have enough. Birthdays came with homemade cakes because bakery cakes were too expensive. Christmas gifts came from thrift stores wrapped with love. I never apologized for what I couldn't give. I simply gave everything I had. Emily used to tell everyone, "My mom can fix anything." Broken backpacks. Broken hearts. Broken dreams. I believed nothing could change what we had. Then she met Daniel. He was kind. Successful. From a wealthy family. His parents owned several restaurants across the state. The first time I met them, I felt underdressed before I even sat down. His mother smiled politely. "So, what do you do?" "I'm a librarian." Oh. Just one word. But somehow it made me feel small. Emily squeezed my hand under the table. That small gesture told me she noticed. After dinner she whispered, "Ignore them." I tried. But things slowly changed. Emily became busier. Calls became shorter. Weekend visits became monthly visits. Then every few weeks. I told myself that was normal. People grow up. People fall in love. Still, something felt different. About 6 weeks before the wedding, I stopped by her apartment with homemade soup because she'd mentioned having a cold. She opened the door only halfway. "Oh. Mom." She looked nervous. "I didn't know you were coming." "I brought soup." She hesitated. Then stepped outside instead of inviting me in. "I can't stay long." I looked past her shoulder. Someone quickly shut a bedroom door. "Is Daniel home?" "He's working." Her answer came too fast. I nodded. "Well, enjoy the soup." As I walked away, I heard voices inside. More than one. I didn't recognize them. For the first time in years. I drove home crying. A week later I called to ask about dress shopping. "Oh." Emily sounded distracted. "I already picked one." "You already did?" "Yeah." "When did you go?" "Last weekend." "I thought we were going together." Silence. Then, "It just happened." That sentence hurt more than she realized. For years we'd dreamed about that moment. When she was little she'd wrap herself in my curtains and pretend they were wedding dresses. She always said, "Mom, you'll help me choose." Apparently, someone else had. My sister Linda called later that night. You okay? Not really. I heard Daniel's mother took her shopping. I froze. How do you know that? I saw photos online. Photos. There were dozens. Emily smiling. Daniel's mother holding her hand. Champagne. Laughter. Everyone looked happy. Except. I wasn't there. No one even noticed. That night I couldn't sleep. The next clue arrived 2 weeks later. I visited the bridal shower. When I walked in, conversation suddenly stopped. Daniel's mother quickly folded a piece of paper and slipped it into her purse. Emily looked startled. Oh. Mom. Again. That same surprised expression. Like I wasn't expected. During games, everyone laughed. I laughed too. But something felt rehearsed. Every time I joined a conversation, it ended. Every time I entered a room, whispers stopped. I caught Daniel looking at me with guilty eyes more than once. As if he wanted to say something. But never did. When I left, I realized I'd forgotten my sweater. I walked back inside. Voices drifted from the kitchen. Richard's voice. We have to make sure she doesn't find out. Daniel answered softly. I hate lying to her. Richard sighed. It's only for a little longer. My heart nearly stopped. They were talking about me. I knew it. I quietly walked away before anyone saw me. That night I called Emily. Is there something you're hiding? What? I heard your father say not to let me find out. Silence. Then. Mom. It's nothing. Nothing. People always say nothing when it's something. Over the following weeks the clues multiplied. Emily ignored several of my calls. She canceled lunch twice. She missed my birthday because of a meeting. Richard suddenly became unusually friendly. Daniel secretly met Richard twice without Emily. I accidentally saw expensive jewelry receipts in Daniel's jacket pocket. Not addressed to Emily. Another afternoon I spotted Emily crying alone inside her car outside a church. She wiped her face before driving away. When I asked if she was okay, she smiled. I've just been stressed. I wanted to believe her. Instead, my imagination became louder than her words. Maybe Daniel was cheating. Maybe Richard knew. Maybe everyone knew except me. Or worse. Maybe Emily was ashamed of me. Maybe Daniel's wealthy family wanted me hidden away. Maybe Emily agreed. Every clue fit together like pieces of a heartbreaking puzzle. Then the wedding seating chart arrived in my mailbox. I searched for my name. Table 18. Near restrooms. My hand shook so badly I dropped the paper. I called Emily immediately. No answer. I texted. Nothing. Hours later she finally replied. It's just seating, Mom. Please don't make this harder. That single message shattered whatever hope I still had. For the first time in my life, I wondered if my daughter wished I wasn't part of her biggest day at all. But I still showed up. Because mothers don't stop loving their children. Even when they believe their children have stopped loving them. I took my seat beside the restroom doors. Guests barely noticed me. Some offered sympathetic smiles. Others pretended not to see. As the music began, I whispered to myself. Smile, Grace. Don't ruin her happiness. Then something happened that made my entire world stop. Halfway down the aisle, Emily suddenly froze. She looked across the ballroom. Straight at me. Then she said 6 words that left every guest speechless. Stop the ceremony. My mother isn't there. And in that single moment, nothing made sense anymore. Stop the ceremony. My mother isn't there. The words echoed through the ballroom. For one strange second, nobody moved. The string quartet stopped playing. The flower girl looked back at Emily, confused. Daniel stood at the altar with his mouth slightly open. Even the minister lowered his Bible. Then someone whispered, "What is she talking about? Her mother's right there." I slowly stood from table 18. People turned toward me. Emily followed their eyes. The moment she saw where I was sitting, all the color drained from her face. She wasn't looking at me with embarrassment. She was looking at me with horror. She lifted the front of her wedding gown and walked back down the aisle. Not slowly. Not gracefully. She almost ran. Every guest watched in stunned silence as my daughter crossed the ballroom toward the back. Toward me. Toward the restroom doors. When she reached my table, she dropped to her knees. "Mom." Her voice cracked. "What are you doing back here?" I stared at her. "This is my table." She looked at the place card. Then at the restroom sign behind me. Then back at the coordinator. "Who did this?" The wedding coordinator rushed over, looking terrified. I followed the revised seating chart. Emily's eyebrows pulled together. "Revised by who?" The coordinator hesitated. "I received an updated copy 2 nights ago." Emily's voice became sharp. "Who sent it?" Before the woman could answer, Daniel's mother, Patricia, hurried over. "Emily, sweetheart, this isn't the time." Emily slowly turned. "You knew?" Patricia swallowed. "It was just seating." "No." Emily shook her head. "It wasn't just seating." She pointed toward me. "That's my mother." Guests began whispering louder. Richard stood from the front table. "Emily, everyone's waiting." She ignored him. Instead, she took my hand. "Mom, please come with me." I gently pulled my hand away. "No." Her eyes filled with tears. "I don't understand." I looked directly at her. "I think you understand perfectly." The room became painfully quiet. "For months," I continued, "I've watched everyone push me farther away. You chose your dress without me. You stopped answering my calls. You hid things from me. You let me believe I didn't belong. And today—" I looked around the ballroom. "You proved it." Emily stared at me as if every sentence physically hurt her. "Mom. I've spent 26 years trying to be enough." My voice trembled. "I couldn't give you expensive vacations. I couldn't give you designer clothes. I couldn't give you rich parents. But I gave you everything I had." A few guests quietly wiped away tears. "I never expected the best seat." I smiled sadly. "I just never expected the worst one." Emily suddenly burst into tears. "No." She whispered. "No, no, no." She looked toward Daniel. "Tell her." Daniel didn't move. He looked completely broken. Emily turned toward Richard. "You tell her." Richard lowered his eyes. Nobody spoke. That silence felt louder than screaming. I slowly nodded. "I knew it." Emily stepped closer. "No, you don't." "Then explain." She opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Finally she whispered. "I can't." That answer crushed me. "You can't." I repeated softly. "Or you won't?" Emily covered her face. Daniel walked over. His voice was barely audible. "I'm sorry." I laughed bitterly. "So I was right." He shook his head. "No. But I still lied." Those words only confirmed everything I believed. Around the ballroom people were quietly choosing sides. Some stared at Daniel's family. Others looked at me with pity. Linda hurried over and wrapped an arm around my shoulders. "I've got you." I leaned against her. For the first time all day, I felt completely exhausted. The minister quietly suggested postponing the ceremony. Nobody argued. Guests began leaving their seats. The celebration dissolved into confusion. Within minutes the ballroom felt almost empty. Only immediate family remained. Emily sat alone by the windows, crying into her bouquet. I wanted to comfort her. Instead, I walked outside. The summer air felt colder than it should have. I sat on a stone bench overlooking the gardens. A few minutes later, someone joined me. Richard. We hadn't sat together quietly in nearly 20 years. I deserve your anger, he said. I kept staring ahead. You always did. He nodded. I know. Neither of us spoke for almost a minute. Finally he reached into his jacket. I was supposed to give you this after dinner. He handed me a thick white envelope. My heart sank. Divorce papers? Some legal document? I slowly opened it. Inside was a property deed. Not just any property. My old bookstore. The little bookstore I'd owned for 7 years before losing it after the divorce. The place where Emily spent every Saturday reading children's books. The place I'd cried over for months after the bank took it. I looked at Richard in confusion. What is this? He smiled sadly. It's yours. I blinked. I don't understand. We bought it back. We? Me. Daniel. Emily. Even Patricia contributed. I stared at him. My mind refused to connect the pieces. Richard continued quietly. The owner finally agreed to sell 6 months ago. I looked back at the deed. The purchase date matched the strange timeline. The timeline when everything changed. The hidden meetings. The secret phone calls. The missing weekends. Richard rubbed his hands together nervously. The building needed repairs. Lots of them. Emily spent almost every weekend helping. I remembered every cancelled lunch. Every missed phone call. Every excuse. They weren't avoiding me. I whispered. Richard shook his head. No. They were rebuilding your dream. Images flashed through my mind. The hardware store receipts. The mysterious meetings. The whispered conversations. The weekend she disappeared. The tears in her car. The jewelry receipt. Richard smiled. The necklace wasn't for another woman. It was engraved. He pointed inside the envelope. A small velvet box had slipped beneath the papers. My hands trembled as I opened it. A silver pendant. Inside was one tiny sentence. She gave me roots before she gave me wings. I couldn't breathe. Richard's own eyes filled with tears. Emily wrote that. Suddenly every clue began rearranging itself. Not into betrayal. Into sacrifice. But. I whispered. The dress shopping? Richard sighed. She cried afterward. She wanted you there. So why wasn't I? He looked away. Because the dress designer insisted on absolute secrecy. What? Richard pointed toward the ballroom. She wasn't choosing a dress. She was designing one. I stared. What? Every stitch. Every piece of lace. Every embroidered flower. She designed it with your old sewing patterns. My chest tightened. My sewing patterns? Richard nodded. She secretly turned your designs into her wedding gown. The air left my lungs. The flowers I'd embroidered onto children's dresses 30 years ago. The little roses I'd always stitched by hand. The same roses were on her wedding dress. I remembered her asking months ago. Mom, do you still have Grandma's old pattern box? I'd happily given it to her. Never asking why. Because I trusted her. She hadn't stolen my memories. She had woven them into the most important dress of her life. Tears blurred everything. Then another memory struck me. The bridal shower. The folded paper Patricia hid. What was in her purse? Richard smiled through tears. The architectural drawings. For your bookstore renovation. Everything. Every single clue. Every whispered conversation. Every lie. Every silence. Every cancelled plan. None of it had been about pushing me away. It had all been about protecting one enormous surprise. Then why? Why had they seated me beside the restrooms? I looked at Richard. His face darkened. Because somebody changed the seating chart. My stomach dropped. If Emily didn't. He shook his head. No. Neither did Daniel. Then who? Before Richard could answer, Linda came running across the garden. She looked pale. Grace. She could barely catch her breath. You need to come inside. What happened? She looked directly at Richard. I think we finally know who changed the seating chart. And when she said the name, every person in the ballroom fell completely silent. The person who changed the seating chart. Linda took a deep breath. Was Patricia. For a second, nobody spoke. Daniel's mother slowly stood from her chair near the front of the ballroom. She wasn't angry. She looked defeated. Daniel stared at her. Mom. Patricia closed her eyes. I did. A wave of whispers swept through the room. Daniel looked completely stunned. You told me you approved Emily's seating chart. I approved the original one, Patricia whispered. I changed it later. Emily stared at her future mother-in-law in disbelief. You moved my mother? Patricia nodded once. I thought. Her voice broke. I thought I was helping. Emily's expression hardened. Helping who? Patricia looked at me. Then lowered her eyes. I've spent my whole life worrying about appearances. She took a shaky breath. Our business partners were sitting in the front. So were local officials. So were investors. I convinced myself that people would judge the wedding if they saw. She stopped. If they saw what? Daniel asked. Patricia wiped away tears. If they saw that the bride's mother wasn't wealthy. The words hit me like cold rain. She continued before anyone could respond. I told myself it wasn't personal. I told myself no one would notice. I even convinced myself you'd understand after the ceremony. She looked at me with genuine regret. But when Emily stopped the wedding, her voice cracked. I realized I wasn't protecting my family's reputation. I was destroying it. The room was silent. No one defended her. No one excused what she had done. Daniel slowly removed his boutonniere. I've never been more disappointed in you. Patricia nodded. I know. Then she turned to me. Grace. I owe you more than an apology. She walked across the ballroom until she stood only a few feet away. I judged you by your bank account. I never took the time to see your heart. I was wrong. I am deeply, completely sorry. Her apology sounded sincere. But my heart still hurt. Not because of the table. Because of everything I had believed for months. I looked at Emily. She was crying harder than anyone. She slowly walked toward me. I'm sorry too. I shook my head. No. She nodded. Yes. I lied. I kept secrets. I watched you feel lonely. I thought one day of pain would be worth the surprise. She reached into her bouquet and carefully pulled out a folded letter. I wrote this weeks ago. It was supposed to be part of my speech tonight. She handed it to me. My hands are shaking too much. Will you read it? The ballroom became so quiet that I could hear someone softly crying in the back. I unfolded the letter. The first line immediately blurred through my tears. Dear Mom. People keep asking me what inspired my wedding. The flowers weren't inspired by Pinterest. The colors weren't inspired by magazines. The dress wasn't inspired by celebrities. Everything came from you. I swallowed hard and continued. Every flower on my dress comes from the little dresses you used to sew when we couldn't afford expensive clothes. Every stitch reminds me of the nights you stayed awake fixing uniforms after working double shifts. Guests quietly wiped away tears. I kept reading. People think love is buying expensive things. But love is eating burnt toast because your daughter gets the last piece. Love is pretending you're not hungry so she can have seconds. Love is wrapping thrift store presents so beautifully that she never notices they weren't new. By now I could barely see the page. Emily whispered. You taught me that. I continued. Everyone will see me wearing this beautiful wedding dress today. But they won't know the real designer. The real designer is the woman who taught me that broken things can become beautiful again. My mother. I couldn't read anymore. The tears came too fast. Emily gently took the letter from my hands. She smiled through tears. I have one more thing. She nodded toward the ballroom doors. They slowly opened. Everyone turned. Outside, parked beside the entrance, stood an old brick building covered with a giant white ribbon. For a moment, I didn't understand. Then I saw the sign. Grace's Corner Bookstore. My knees nearly gave out. Daniel hurried to support me. No. I whispered. It can't be. Emily smiled. It can. She took my hand. We've been restoring it for 6 months. Every mysterious clue suddenly came rushing back. The hidden phone calls. The hardware receipts. The secret meetings. The weekend she disappeared. The architectural drawings. The whispered conversations. The tears inside her car. She hadn't been ashamed of me. She had been protecting the biggest thank you she could imagine. We walked outside together. The building looked almost exactly as it had 20 years earlier. The blue shutters. The flower boxes. Even the little brass bell above the front door. Emily reached into her bouquet one last time. This time she pulled out a single old key. I recognized it instantly. My bookstore key. The one I thought had been lost forever. I found it in one of your old sewing boxes, she said. I kept it because I promised myself. She couldn't finish. I smiled. Finish. She laughed through tears. I promised myself that one day I'd give your dream back. She placed the key into my hand. The metal felt warm. Real. Heavy. Hope has weight. I unlocked the door. The little bell rang. Exactly the way it used to. Inside. I couldn't speak. Every bookshelf had been rebuilt. My old rocking chair sat in the reading corner. Family photographs filled one wall. There was even a small children's section named Mom's Reading Tree. A little plaque hung underneath. Dedicated to Grace Carter, who taught one little girl that stories can save hearts. I completely broke down. Not graceful tears. Not quiet tears. The kind that come from years of carrying invisible burdens. Emily wrapped her arms around me. I never wanted to hurt you. I know. I just wanted one day where I could finally give back even a tiny piece of everything you gave me. I kissed her forehead. You already did. Back at the ballroom, the guests had waited. No one complained. No one left. When we returned, the minister smiled warmly. I believe we're ready. Emily stopped him. 1 minute. She turned to the coordinator. I have one request. The coordinator nodded nervously. Emily walked over to the seating chart. She picked it up. Then quietly tore it in half. The room applauded. She smiled at me. There. Now there are no assigned seats. She looked around the ballroom. My mother doesn't belong in the back. She belongs wherever my heart is. Then she took my hand. Mom. Will you walk me down the aisle? I looked toward Richard. He smiled. It's your turn. Without a word, he stepped aside. I walked beside my daughter. Not behind anyone. Not hidden. Not forgotten. Every guest stood. Many were openly crying. As we reached the altar, Emily squeezed my hand. You once told me something when I was little. I smiled. I told you a lot of things. She laughed. You said, the people who love you most should never have to compete for your place in your life. She looked into my eyes. I finally understand what you meant. The ceremony continued. This time, not with perfect decorations. Not with perfect seating. But with perfect love. Months later, Grace's Corner bookstore became more than a bookstore. It became a place where children gathered for story hour, grandparents read with their grandchildren, and neighbors who had never spoken before became friends over books and coffee. Emily often visited after work. Sometimes she would quietly shelve books beside me without saying a word. We didn't always need words anymore. One rainy afternoon, she smiled and asked, Mom, do you still think I was ashamed of you? I laughed softly. No. I think I forgot something important. What? I looked around the little bookstore that love had rebuilt. The deepest love sometimes looks like distance, until the whole story is finally told. She hugged me. And I realized something I will carry for the rest of my life. A seat near the restrooms can make you feel forgotten for a moment. But the place you hold in someone's heart is the only seat that truly lasts forever.